I have Mondo Davison. How you doing, sir?
Man, I'm doing good. I just had some good food, so I'm feeling great and refreshed.
Yeah, the weather's great.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. So the Black Tech Guy, you are in the studio. This is awesome, blessing us with your presence on Altitude. Mondo, I have the pleasure of knowing you for a very short period of time, but long enough to know that your family and all of your relatives that I've met have this very distinct vertical in STEM and STEAM, and actually, right? Because I've had a chance to work with younger nephews and everybody. So tell me a little bit about how you got to be. I'm going to ask you later how you got to be the Black Tech Guy.
Yeah.
But what got you there? I mean, what was this family about that got you into inspiration of being so techie and nerdy and all that stuff?
Yeah. I think it's, the interesting thing about that is I grew up in a middle class household, right? I definitely would say we didn't have the struggle where so many Black families talk about going through the struggle. Like, I lived in a privileged environment. And so being part of that privileged environment, like when it came to cool tech stuff, like we always had it. Every game system or whatever, it was just always in the house. I remember for Christmas one year, like I got a replica Star Trek phone, like whatever the ship is for Star Trek. It's like, it was and you take it off and like that's what you talk with. And it wasn't that functional, right? It was just like, I don't want to hold this big thing to my ear, but it was like, that was a type of environment we grew up in where it's always some cool tech, something to play with. And I think that just transcended later on in life. Like, hey, let's do and create some cool things in tech as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about education and well, ultimately you'll explain what you're doing now, but like what type of educational background do you have that you want to share?
And I jumped around a ton. So when I graduated from high school, I was a kid that I'm gonna play professional sports. Like that was my journey. I tell that to everybody, and like I believed it 150%. And I was privileged again to have a family that was like, okay, if that's what you want to do, you better work harder than everybody else. So I had this level of belief, like I believed I can do it. And so, after graduating from high school, I went to University of Tennessee, I went to Florida A&M, HBCU, that changed my life. And I went to Augsburg, I went to Anoka Ramsey, I was just all over the place. But through all that, it was just a bunch of different experiences of like, education is quite dynamic. And so I was exposed to a lot of different environments, but tech really wasn't part of that journey. So like tech didn't enter my life as like a career or an option until January 7th, 2010.
Well, continue with that. So what happened on January 7th, 2010?
January 7th, 2010 was definitely the transformative moment where at the time I was an educator for St. Paul Public Schools, and it was like, oh, this is a solid job, it's cool, but I knew I wasn't gonna be there for the rest of my life. And so I was flicking through channels, it was like 7, 8 at night, and I came across this show called Planet of the Apps, and it was on CNBC, I believe. I can't remember, CNBC or MSNBC, one of the two, but I've never watched anything on that channel before or after that day, right? It's just not for me. But it was a special created by Apple that was saying, hey, we're about to open up the door for outside developers to build apps for iPhones. It's gonna be the next big thing. Learn how to build apps. And literally it was that 1 hour segment where I was like, oh, I wanna do that. And so from that day forward, I just started. That's what it was, just start.
So tell me, what type of business do you have from an app perspective? You came out with some pretty creative app not too long ago.
I think that, so my strength is, oh man, Mr. Wulf, you got a cool idea. Let me see if I can wrap tech around it. Or hey, brother, or cousin, or whoever, that's a cool idea. We can wrap tech around it and scale it. And so being an educator for 7 years, there was a lot of different, room for growth, right? To be positive in education, especially for people that look like you and I. And so it was like, oh, there's not any books in the classroom that look like us. There's not any music that's infused into the classroom that looks like us. There's so many different variables where it's like, hey, tech could play a role, tech could play a role, tech could play a role. So my strength was like, let me build these platforms in education to disrupt things and leverage our creativity or our creative genius as people of color.
Yeah, absolutely. What other areas of technology do you think are going to be on the horizon?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, we all talk about, AI and all this stuff. One thing that was cool to me, so I office out of the Glenn Nelson Center and Lunar Startups floor, and there's some cool things happening with, what is it? Dang, now I forgot the word.
Well, you said the Lunar Startup Center?
Yeah, it's Lunar Startup
Virtual
Center.
reality?
Yeah, it's not virtual reality. It's augmented audio. Sorry.
Oh, augmented audio.
Augmented audio.
The
So,
audio piece of that. Okay.
right. So, Glenn Nelson Center is filled with a bunch of cool, creative people that are partnering with NPR. And so it's like, how can NPR partner with some cool people to disrupt audio, right? Because clearly that's their industry. And so, like, one of the companies in there talks about, hey, you can put in these headphones, walk down, let's say Rondo, right? And all of a sudden it's like, ding. And then you get this augmented audio of a story about that block based on your location. Or so you think about that, scale it to any museum, scale it to any community, and it's like, that's dope because there's so many stories out there, right? Where it's like audio would be just amazing. So I was like, man, I wish I came up with that idea, because when you think about traveling, it's like you no longer then need a guide. You can open up this app and say, there's 17 guides. I like this black guy right here. I'm gonna follow his journey and then just go for it. So anyways, I think that augmented audio is going to be extremely powerful, and I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to it. And so,
Well, especially in light of the bandwidth requirements are much less than video, and I know everybody's talking about 5G and whenever that's going to show up. So the reality of it is NPR is very forward thinking in terms of trying to understand how they can, implement that, as well as think of all the other applications.
Right,
for it.
right.
So travel, everything. So
amazing.
it is pretty amazing. So we've talked a little bit about education, we've talked a little bit about career, and so any other thoughts that you have for like a young person about their career, what passion they should pursue, or education on how you got there? What would you advise a young person today?
So I read 2 books recently that were very transformative. So the first book that ever really, really transformed my life to my core was 4 Agreements. And it just helped me like center as a person. And so outside of that book, I've read some dope things, but in the last month and a half, I read The Alchemist and Manifest Now.
Really?
And so I had read The Alchemist before some years back, but it didn't really resonate with me at the time. And so when I read it again, it was just about like going outside your comfort zone and like finding your personal legend, whatever that is. And so I feel like a lot of us are navigating life in this environment that's comfortable to us. And it's like, well, step outside of it. And once you step outside of it and you see this new world, you're gonna learn a lot of cool stuff. And the cool things that you learn is the joy, right? It's the journey is a joy. And it took me a while to understand, like, it's not the end destination. It's like, I'm on this journey as a black tech guy trying to do cool stuff. And it's like, yeah, I know I wanna get here, but Mondo, you need to start appreciating what's happening right now. And that's what Manifest Now and The Alchemist did for me. It was like, focus on right now. And I get to come and be on shows like this with you, right? I get to work with young people. I get to build creative apps. And so I've been more present in like what's happening right now and all the blessings that I have. So I guess my feedback or whatever to some young people is like, hey, what's happening right now? What do you love about it? And can you multiply that? Can you do it over and over and over, that thing that you care about? Or do you want to step outside your comfort zone and do something completely different? And then if you do, just enjoy the journey, because the journey is where it's at.
Yeah, don't be afraid and just enjoy the journey. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So our last imparting thought. So now we've heard about this incredible experience that you have and all these wonderful things that you're doing. Is there any one thing or anything you want to share, like your things that you truly love to do when you put everything else on the shelf? Do you have any personal passions outside of this, or is this your passion?
That's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that, I talked about having the privilege of being in a middle class family, and with that is like having an awesome father. And so I felt like I had the blueprint of how to be a great dad. And so Like aside from business, it's like I'm a father to my daughter, and she definitely runs the world. Before we came, where this morning she's like, "All right, Dad, I need $20. Can you drop it off? I need to go out to the mall? I got my nails done and all, and, just all this cool stuff." But it's all right. You are being a consumer. I'll give. We got enough money where I can give, and you can go buy $20 things. But how do I then coach you early to say, all right, become a producer? Right, produce content, produce material, produce something. And so right now, outside of me building myself, I'm trying to build her, YouTube, something, right? Like just see yourself as an asset instead of just a consumer. So that's definitely a passion.
Good. Well, thank you so much for this interview. I appreciate the time that you've taken away being an entrepreneur and businessman. And we look forward to many, many more ventures and watching you along your journey. So thank you for joining this episode of Altitude.
Thank you.
All right, sir. This was an amazing show. We're so glad that you stayed through the entire episode. Hopefully you will find information that is valuable as you choose education in the future, as you choose options for careers, and maybe think a little bit about what kind of lifestyle that you want to live after you choose a career in STEAM. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and the math are all about you, and you can absolutely do this. So stay tuned to our next episode of Altitude.